What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into TTP Sports. And Eagles fans are definitely not panicking. I would 100% assure you that Eagles fans are not panicking as the NFL's legal tampering period opened up yesterday afternoon, and they found out that the Eagles are going to be losing quite a few players to the tampering period once free agency opens. And yes, Eagles fans are perfectly calm. They're perfectly intact. They're not going crazy whatsoever. That is a bold-faced lie because Eagles fans are panicking right now, and it's absolutely insane, honestly. I didn't expect the Eagles to lose this many people to start free agency, even though a free agency didn't officially open up yet. It's the legal tampering period. Free agency doesn't open up until tomorrow afternoon, I believe. But it's still kind of insane to see some of the people that are leaving the Eagles, and we didn't expect them to lose quite a few players because obviously it's the Super Bowl tax. When you win a Super Bowl, players that are up for contracts, they want to get pay raises. They want to get more money. They want to make that bag. And that's the loss that you're going to have to deal with, when you win a Super Bowl. And that's what we're seeing with, some of the players that did leave Philadelphia. Some of them still, I was kind of shocked that they let leave, but I'm not going in the full panic state that a lot of Eagles fans are going. I definitely will question some of the decisions that Howie Roseman chose not to make, but I still want to believe in Howie Roseman's plan because he did tell us that the start of this offseason is going to be very unorthodox and something that Eagles fans are not used to. You're just going to have to give him patience, and also talking about relying on young players and how obviously the offseason doesn't just end with free agency starting. It doesn't end with the draft. This offseason is going to be very long. It's going to be very, collected. It's going to be very methodical from Howie Roseman in terms of what moves he is going to make. And we'll see where things go. But yes, obviously Eagles fans are panicking right now just because they have no idea what is in store next once Howie Roseman eventually starts cooking. And yes, I do feel like some people are justified in just having the little bit of doubt in the back of their mind. But I think full and foremost, I won't go full blind faith into trusting Howie Roseman, but I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt 100% at the end of the day to make sure this team is still very much competitive. And I'm a highly, they're 100% going to be competitive next year. I'm not doubting that in the slightest, which some people are, but it's absolutely crazy. It really is. So before we get into everything here, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTP Sports. If you are new to the channel, I definitely recommend that you do hit that subscribe button. It does me a very great deal of service with the YouTube algorithm. You can also drop a like. You can also leave a comment in the comment section down below. I love to interact with you guys down there. You can also use the code TTP Sports, $20 off your first purchase at SEATGEEK. It's a great deal. Don't pass it up. You can also follow at TikTok and Instagram at TTP Sports for real shorts and all of that good stuff. So basically, once again, it comes to the same term of details that I wanted to try to get a video out yesterday. And I guess in terms, procrastinating kind of helps me out more just because there's been so much news in revolving around the Eagles and losing a lot of players and also trading some players. I guess the procrastination actually helps. So if we're going through a full summary of what happened basically with the Eagles yesterday, all the players that they have lost in the tampering period in terms of trades, it's actually pretty crazy, and some of them are very unexpected, but also some are expected at the same time. So Darius Slay, we know he's eventually going to get cut. I think they're not cutting him until around June 1st or something like that because it, lessens the cap penalty. It definitely helps with, saving money on the cap for future reasons and everything like that. So it does sound like Darius Slay is going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's definitely something that is happening. Isaiah Rodgers, something that was kind of unexpected. We were maybe thinking that the Eagles were going to keep him and maybe use him out, in the corner outside of Quinyon Mitchell to maybe because, maybe Kelly Ringo was not ready yet, but Isaiah Rodgers walks, and maybe Keely Ringo is the guy that they're looking for on the outside corner spots, alongside with Quinyon, so I have no idea what's going to happen there. That was definitely shocking. He goes to Minnesota. And then Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, we all expected those guys to leave in free agency, and those guys got paid. Those guys got paid a whole ton for, more rotational pieces, and not really rotational pieces. Josh Sweat was a mainstay on the defensive front. Milton Williams was more of a rotational type of guy, and that's not, diminishing their role whatsoever, because those guys were a huge cog in this defense full front. And obviously, they were going to leave. They were going to try to go get a pay raise. They were trying to go get that bag. And getting that bag is absolutely what they got. Milton Williams gets a whole lot of money from the New England Patriots, and Josh Sweat gets a whole lot of money from the Arizona Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon. So, yeah, it was obvious those guys were leaving as well. Eagles also lost a couple of more players. Burks, that was kind of a shocker that they leave. I believe he went to Cincinnati. So, there definitely were some weird things out there. But overall, I wasn't in full panic mode after, tampering day, because that was, things that more or less I expected to happen, especially, with Slay being cut, with Milton Williams obviously leaving, with Josh Sweat obviously testing the market and all that stuff. So it was less shocking than not with those guys leaving. I guess Isaiah Rodgers was probably kind of the more shocking one, but it's not the end of the world. It definitely isn't at the end of the day. But the one thing that was definitely shocking as we all wake up this morning was the Eagles trading CJ Garder-Johnson. That definitely was a move that I did not expect at all. So he gets traded to the Houston Texans for a couple of pick swaps, and also offensive lineman Kenyon Green as well. He was a first-round pick a couple of years ago, I believe, in the 2022 draft, where I believe he was a couple selections after the Eagles drafted Jordan Davis. So we'll see where that goes. Is that another person that's going to be going into Jeff Statler University and maybe trying to reshape his, very early career? He played, I believe, in all the games in 2022. He missed the entirety of the 2023 season, I believe, with injury, and he only played in 9 games in the 2024 season, and overall the results haven't been the best with Green. I believe some people, I've seen a lot of the the quote-unquote experts and a lot of people that look at the film and look at all the stat sheets, the cards and whatnot, and they say that Green has definitely been one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL in the recent years. So this is definitely a lot of work for Jeff Statler to do, even though I don't doubt Jeff Statler whatsoever, because he can turn basically dirt in the diamonds, if that's even a good fucking comparison. He could turn basically anything into gold. That's basically what Jeff Statler can do. And can he do that? Can he reshape another career in Kenyon Green? Possibly. I have no idea. But it also makes me wonder that when you're trading CJ Garder-Johnson, you're getting an offensive lineman in the return. Does that mostly mean Mekhi Becton is gone? That probably is going to be the case. I think there were some talks yesterday during the tampering period opening that the Eagles were trying to get something done with Mekhi Becton, and they just weren't seeing anything on both sides. So maybe this is the ramifications of that. And Mekhi Becton is going to be testing the market once the free agency period opens up. That could possibly be the case, but it definitely was shocking to see CJ Garder-Johnson go, and maybe there was a little bit of writing on the wall because of all the stuff that CJ Garder-Johnson was going throughout social media. When Slay was officially announced that he was going to be cut, then he goes on the podcast talking about leadership and everything involved with the Eagles, and maybe in a little bit of a negative tone, but he was just doing Darius Slay things because, Darius Slay just talks, he's just being himself, and I guess that rubs CJ Garder-Johnson the wrong way. It kind of went a little bit off on Twitter. He definitely did, to say the least. And maybe that was the reason why the Eagles traded him. I have no idea. But I believe it was Zach Berman that actually went through like a whole list of context as to possibly why the Eagles would trade away CJ Garder-Johnson. And it's like CJ Garder-Johnson was a very huge, important factor into the Eagles defense because obviously he can force turnovers. He brings that swag. He brings that attitude. He brings some type of leadership. And he brings like an edge to the defense that the Eagles definitely missed in the 2023 season. And that definitely, is something that's going to be missed. And obviously the 2 years that you have CJ Garder-Johnson on your roster, you go to the Super Bowl, and obviously CJ Garder-Johnson is not the sole reason why you go deep in the playoffs. And maybe there's something to him, being on four teams in 4 different seasons, obviously, with being on the Eagles, being on the Saints, being on the Detroit Lions, going back to the Eagles, and now being on the Houston Texans. Maybe there is something to that, maybe his antics are just a little too much for the front office and the locker room to handle, and maybe that's just something that they don't want to deal with anymore. Maybe there's something to that 100%. But I want to go to this post from Zach Berman right here on Twitter about, maybe putting his 2 cents into it and possibly the context of why the Eagles probably traded CJ Garder-Johnson. So it's a pretty couple of long tweets right here, so I'm just going to go over right here. So Zach Berman posts some context here. My sense is the Eagles were getting ahead of the contract situation with CJ Garder-Johnson. There's a big picture element with how the Eagles are going to be able to keep some players due for contract because they're in the next 2 to 3 years. Kenyon Green, a player who visited the Eagles in 2022, in the pre-draft process gives them a high upside guard on a rookie contract. You can't pay all 5 linemen 8-digit contracts. That definitely does make sense. The Eagles remain intrigued by Sidney Brown in the same spirit as Kelee Ringo, Moro Jomo. They want their younger players to have a chance to play. For a team-building perspective, a 24-year-old offensive lineman on a rookie deal is enticing compared to a 27-year-old safety on a veteran contract. That said, CJ Garder-Johnson is a difference maker. He takes the ball away and has a competitive zeal that affected the defense much time before they play a game, and I'd pay attention to some of these safeties in the draft too. And Zach Berman also posted another thing right here. And CJ Garder-Johnson, I've long contended that he brings a competitive zeal that is beneficial to the defense. That was apparent in the 2022 and the 2024 season, and the Eagles missed him in 2023, and I think they'll miss him in 2025 as well. But it's also fair to note that this is a different defense. Zach Bond, Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, and Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis have all demonstrated the physicality that the Eagles crave. My guess is that's where they're expecting it to come from. And yeah, definitely when you look at when CJ Garder-Johnson left after the 2022 Super Bowl, Super Bowl 57 and all that stuff, he goes to Detroit. The defense definitely is in a bigger hole. You make some other signings to maybe supplement the loss of CJ Garder-Johnson. And obviously he does bring that attitude, like, Zach Berman stated, that definitely was something that was missing in 2023, via when the 49ers came to town, push came to shove, the defense collapsed. They let basically the 49ers run all over them, and that led to the entire collapse, basically, of the 2023 season. Now, you go into 2024, you bring back CJ, and he brings some leadership. Obviously, the very much younger defense. There's some unproven commodities there. Obviously, you bring Zach Bond on a prove-it deal, and the defense, miraculously under Vic Fangio, turns into the best defense in the NFL. Now, obviously, in the 2023 season, you went from Jonathan Gannon to Sean Desai, then eventually Matt Patricia. So maybe there was, some other reasons why the defense completely imploded on itself and completely collapsed, not just from the missing factor that was CJ Garder-Johnson. You have Vic Fangio. This man has been around the league for eons. Way before I was born, way before probably anybody was born. This man has been born and bred into the NFL. He is an NFL full-timer for life. And for a man that is Vic Fangio, I trust his presence, I trust his vision, and maybe trust his recommendations as to what the defense and the personnel probably should be. And I'm not saying that Vic Fangio didn't like CJ Garder-Johnson. Maybe the attitude was too much for the coaching staff to handle as well, and they just wanted to get that out of the locker room. So maybe there's something to that. But I do expect, especially from a lot of the young, great talent that is on the Philadelphia Eagles side, when you look at, the staples of their defense, especially on the younger side. Jalen Carter is going to be a staple for the Eagles' defensive front for years to come. And definitely, I think some of these moves do have the impact of possibly just trying to prepare to extend Jalen Carter because he is going to get a massive payday. Same thing when you eventually extend Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Those guys are staples in the backfield for you. So those are things right there. You just extended Zach Bond, especially him after coming on a prove-it deal, to him becoming an all-pro linebacker and getting one of the highest-paid linebacking deals in NFL history. So you got your staples there. And maybe CJ Garder-Johnson, he wasn't a staple. He was a good starter, but he wasn't a staple as to what made the team flourish, what made the team roll. Yeah, he brought that attitude, he brought that swagger, and maybe that helped, get the Eagles over the edge and have the right attitude and the right mentality going in game after game, week after week, and especially into the playoffs. But I guess I trust Vic Fangio's instincts to trust these younger guys. I trust Howie Roseman's instincts to trust these younger guys, because do teams really game plan for CJ Garder-Johnson? No. They game plan for Jalen Carter. They game plan for Quinyon Mitchell. That's why you always see Jalen Carter get double teamed. That's why you always see Quinyon Mitchell going up against the top wide receivers and completely shutting them down. You trust these guys to take a next step in becoming the leaders for this team for the foreseeable future. You had your veterans in here, you had your leaders, now it's time for these other young guys to step up and become the leader that is going to be a mainstay for the Eagles for years and years and years to come, and that hopefully goes into winning more Super Bowls for years and years to come. Obviously, having Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell definitely helps that side with the defense, and then you have some other guys that are locked up, like a Zach Bond. And it's also good to have when you have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean still on their rookie deals. Same thing with a Jalen Carter, even though those guys are going to be getting their paydays in years to come. Still, it is better to have guys that have talent on cheaper contracts, and then you eventually pay them down the line. That's what Howie Roseman likes to do. He likes to get the contract extensions done and over with, even if they have like a couple of years left on their rookie deal. He likes to get those out and done with, and that's basically how you manipulate the cap. You get that stuff done and over with. Even with the cap constantly going up year after year, you get those situations done, and you don't have to worry about it for years to come at that point. I trust Howie Roseman's judgment. I trust Vic Fangio's judgment. And we'll have to see where that goes. Now, I don't know where they're going to go in the free agency route. Howie Roseman, it's still a very long time. Basically, the offseason just started. Free agency hasn't officially started yet. It's just a tampering period. So we have no idea what Howie Roseman's going to do. Does he try to find some, once again, prove-it type of deals like he did with Zach Bond? Now he's going to get lucky again with finding another person like a Zach Bond that could just come in and then just dramatically turn into an all-pro. No, I don't think that's going to happen again, even though that would be very hilarious if that were the case. If some guy that, still has a lot of juice left in the tank, hasn't really found their full potential for a team that they've been playing for. They come to Philadelphia for a prove-it deal and a chance to compete for a playoff spot, and a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. And under Vic Fangio's defense and Vic Fangio's mindset, they turn into a complete all-pro. That would just be funny. I don't know why. It would just be funny how you just 2 years in a row you pick a guy off of nothing, and they become fantastic, because that's basically what happened with Zach Bond. Now, like I said, I don't expect that to happen at all. I don't. But where do you try to go with this free agency? Do you obviously try to go for players on prove-it type of deals like you did with Zach Bond? Or do you go more of the veteran route where they have a lot of mileage on their body, but they still have a lot of, a little bit left in the tank before they eventually, go on the roll to where they're eventually being very close to retirement? They still have a lot of juice left in their terms of the league. Maybe they're in their early 30s, maybe near their mid 30s. Players that have like maybe 2-3 years left in the tank, maybe 1-2 years left in the tank of their career. Do you go after those type of veterans and then those are the, the regular starters. Those are the rotational type of guys, and then you rely on a lot of the young players to step up. I'm not sure where you go in that case, because from a lot of these posts, and especially with the CJ Garner-Johnson trade, a lot of people talk about Sidney Brown and all that stuff. Is Sidney Brown ready to take that next step and maybe go into a role like a CJ Garner-Johnson? I have no idea. Is Ojomo, for the offensive, perspective, going to be, a threat? Do they really trust in Alex Hunt? I have no idea. But still, like I said, this offseason isn't done, and Howie Roseman is going to make moves. He is going to do things that adds to this team. He is going to do things that is going to put this team in the best possible position to still compete for an NFC East division title, for, a possibility to get to NFC Championship game, and for a possibility to go and win a Super Bowl. He is going to do everything possible to put this team in that type of position. And just because the Eagles lost some rotational guys, and they did lose a starter in CJ Garner-Johnson, there is no room to go full panic mode. I just think that's kind of ridiculous there at the end of the day, that a lot of people are just like full panic. It's just, yeah, you lost some guys, but they weren't bringing back Milton Williams for the price that he got with the Patriots. They weren't bringing back Josh Sweat at the price that he got from the Cardinals. That wasn't happening. Yeah, maybe they could have brought back Rodgers. Slay, it probably looked like that was just, it was eventually going to happen. They were eventually going to lose him when they cut them. That was something that was writing on the wall. Burks, could they have kept? Possibly. But still not the end of the world. If your team collapses because you lose Isaiah Rodgers, if your team collapses because you lose Burks, and not Daniel Burks. Burks played a big role, especially when the Kobe Dean got injured in the playoffs last year. And that's also something they have to factor in too when Kobe Dean eventually gets healthy. What's going to happen with him? That's another young guy, a guy that, very flourished last year under Vic Fangio. Does, him coming off of injury, what's that going to happen? So there's a lot of things that you got to wonder about that right there. But if you collapse because you lose some of these rotational pieces, and yes, Slay was a starter, but he's on the back nine of his career. Milton Williams was a rotational piece, and a very good rotational piece that is, but he's getting paid Jalen Carter type of money. You're not paying Milton Williams that. You're not paying Josh Sweat that. And Josh Sweat is a very good starter. But you're not paying Josh Sweat that type of money. It just wasn't going to happen. And this is also the factor of some people, what they call it, the Super Bowl tax. You're going to lose guys. And Howie Roseman's not going to be able to keep every single person. It's just not going to be happening. Now, this is really, you got to see what happens. How do you build sustained success? Maybe it's constantly bringing in young talent, building through the draft. I expect Howie Roseman to have another fantastic draft like he did the past couple of seasons. What does he do in free agency? What does he do in the trade market? Does he still trade Dallas Goedert? There's a lot of talk about him possibly going for a day 2 pick, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I still don't think it's the end of the world if you do trade Dallas Goedert, even though I would prefer to keep him. We got to see. We got to see what happens. I do trust Howie Roseman. I think some people are going a little bit too crazy on the panic route, even though I do understand some people being skeptical just because of what happened in 2023 and the way that big overturn caused a gigantic collapse. But also people got to understand that even with the collapse in 2023, you still started 10-1. So there was some method to the madness there. It just all came crashing down because the defense got terrible. And maybe that was a combination of the coordinators and the personnel. I believe you have way better personnel than what you had in 2023. I think that's just a fact. And I think this personnel is better suited to go through some roster overturn. I think they're more suited for that. So we got to wait and see. We got to wait and see what Howie Roseman does. But man, it definitely was a crazy day in terms of losing a lot of people. The 49ers lost a lot of people because they're preparing to pay Brock Purdy a boatload of money. A lot of teams are just losing a lot of people. Daniel Jones went to the Indianapolis Colts. DK Metcalf got traded to the Steelers and extended there for a lot of money. And now the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying to look at who are they signing in free agency for their quarterback position. A lot of talk about Aaron Rodgers and all that stuff, so that would be hilarious. Also, the Giants are talking about signing Aaron Rodgers, which would be absolutely hilarious. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting time. It really is. It really is. Now people are trying to do their conspiracy theories about the whole CJ Gardner-Johnson trade, especially when Darius Slay was talking about that on the podcast that he did appear on, about the leaderships and all that stuff. A lot of people say a lot of things. Like I said, there's probably something due there. You know what I mean? With him being on multiple teams in multiple years, there's something to that. Regardless of his talent, there's probably something to that. So I wouldn't doubt that in the slightest. But we do have a voicemail here on the Anytime Hotline, so we might as well get to that before we end off this. So let's get to Sean. Let's see what he has to say about the Eagles and the crazy start to the offseason.
Well, one thing's for sure, Eagles free agency hasn't been uneventful. As far as today's trade goes, number one, it's obvious that C.J. Garder-Johnson's mouth sometimes writes checks that his ass has to cash. I mean, this is a guy that wore out his welcome to a degree the first time and now seems to have worn it out again. The part that intrigues me is, and as I make this call, I haven't heard anything from it, is Slay is still out there. Technically, he has not inked a deal with the Steelers. So is that part of this, that they want to bring Slay back, but they don't think he can cohabitate with Gardner-Johnson? I don't know. The other thing that strikes me is, I think there's a lot of input from the coaching staff. As far as Green goes, that's a player that Jeff Stoutland probably told Roseman, hey, you bring me this guy who's been in the league a few years but is still very, very young. I think I can develop him knowing that Becton is out the door. And Fangio probably says, hey, we got the kid from Georgia, Lewis Seen, back there. We have Sidney Brown. I think these kids are ready for the next step up. I believe I can coach.
A little bit of cut off there.
I don't know, but all I'm saying is, again, people are panicking, and I understand it. People are frustrated, and I understand that. But I have to look at the puzzle as a whole, not each individual piece, before I can judge and make a conclusion as to how he's doing.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree with that. Full and foremost, we can't fully judge the beginning of the offseason without waiting for the rest of the offseason to finish. Because Howie Roseman is going to try to put this team in the best possible position to compete for another Super Bowl because the dynasty window is still open for this team. That definitely is a good point about Darius Slay because technically, yeah, he's not cut yet. And he's not fully officially inked a deal with the Steelers. The Eagles, they're talking about not expecting to cut up until June 1st and everything like that. So maybe things can change there. Maybe they work something out with Slay where they do cut him, but he does ink a cheaper deal, better money for the cap, back for the Eagles. I don't know. I don't know, but that definitely would be something that's very intriguing right there. I wouldn't be shocked if that is the case, even though I do expect Slay to leave more than not. But I also wouldn't be shocked if he does return, especially with C.J. Gardner-Johnson now gone. Maybe there was something there where those two just can't intertwine in the same locker room, and maybe there was a lot of input from the coaching staff. I trust their judgment. I trust the judgment of Jeff Stoutland. I trust the judgment of Vic Fangio. And hey, if they believe in a lot of these young players and they think that some of these young players are ready for the next step of their development, I can't say no to that. I can't say no to that because I do think what makes really good sustainable success is being able to, when guys do eventually leave, and some of those are the rotational guys, that other guys are able to step up into those specific positions. Now, it is a lot to ask of young players. It's a lot to ask of Jalen Hunt. It's a lot to ask of a Jomo. It's a lot to ask of a lot of some of these people, like Kelly Ringo, Sidney Brown's, a lot to ask of these guys. But if they do believe that they're ready, I have to put my faith in it. I think that's the rightful stance right there. So, we'll see. So, yeah, I think that'll do it for today, everybody. I appreciate all of you for tuning in as always. So don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Do not forget to drop a like. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button. It does me a great deal of service. And also use the code TTPSPORTS, $20 off your first purchase at SEATGEEK. And also follow on TikTok and Instagram at TTPSports for reels and shorts and all that good stuff. So appreciate you guys for tuning in as always. And I'll see you next time.